Without question, the absolute godfather of the modern craft beer movement is Sierra Nevada. So it's about time that we take their flagship pale ale and show you exactly how to clone it yourself at home. Let's get started. The very first step in this attempt to clone one of the juggernauts of the craft beer world is the grain bill. In this case, it's actually relatively simple. The classic American pale ales don't have these huge complex grain bills with 5 different grains and all these different adjuncts going on. It's very simple. We are going to be running with 93% of our grain bill being American 2-row barley and 7% being a medium variety of crystal malt. That's it. We want a clean, biscuity style flavor coming from the barley, and then we want that little bit of crystal malt in there. Well, actually not a little bit, it's a pretty significant amount. We want that crystal in there to really thicken up the palate, give us a lot of that chewy, caramel-like character, and hold together the relatively large amount of IBUs that we're gonna be using in this beer. So, let's get this crushed, and we can get moving. The grain mill worked first go this time. That is grains crushed. It's time to talk about our water profile. Now there's one thing I need to say before we get too much deeper into this video. I am very aware that Sierra Nevada did some years ago publish their homebrew version of their pale ale recipe. Fully aware of that, completely across it. However, there are key pieces of that recipe that are missing. One of those big key pieces is the water profile. Fortunately though, in this case, because it's a fairly standard style of the New World American Pale Ale, we can make some pretty decent assumptions to get us at least 90% of the way there. One thing we do know is that there'll be a decent mineral content, but it's not gonna be in West Coast IPA level territory. So here's what I'm thinking of using for mine. I'm gonna go 51 parts per million of calcium for healthy yeast fermentation, 5 parts of magnesium, 15 sodium, 50 parts chloride, 75 parts sulfate, and purely because I can't remove it from my water because I don't use RO, 57 parts per million of bicarbonate. If you have the chance to use RO water, don't use the bicarbonate in there. It's not needed for this style of beer. The only important thing that in my mind you should keep in mind here is a decent amount of calcium. In this case, sticking between 50 to 100 parts per million would be ideal, and having that slightly higher sulfate to chloride ratio. Not a full 2-to-1, but in this case, we're going like 1.5 parts of sulfate for every 1 part of chloride. That's gonna help emphasize the bitterness coming from the hops, which we want in an American pale ale, but also the sharpness of the fresh pieces of the hops, rather than what you do with a NEPA, where you go malt forward to emphasize the juiciness. All that being said, if this is absolute gibberish to you and I'm speaking hieroglyphics, please check out that video up there, which is all about water chemistry 101 and how to adjust water profiles. Now, let's start mashing in. I'm aware that we're brewing an American pale ale today. Unfortunately, as you might tell by my accent, I am not American. I speak Australian. Therefore, we are going to be mashing in with 15 liters of strike water at 65 degrees Celsius. That in freedom units, courtesy of Odin, who is not yet here today. So I'm having to film once again by myself. Comments down below to get Odin to show up for brew days more often, because this is getting unacceptable. But all that being said, let's go ahead and start mashing in. So, there's 2 ways that you could mash in my eyes. You could use the old school method, which is absolutely fine, where you grab out a, trusty mash paddle and put in some elbow grease, get your workout in, and you deserve your beer. I am lazy, therefore I use the paint mixer. This is a specially designed paint mixer specifically for brewing. If you want to use one of these and just speed up your mash in for brew days, link down below. We get a small kickback from Kegland whenever you buy their stuff through us, so it helps us keep making content like this on the channel. Costs you nothing, but it helps us out a whole lot. That's the plug finished. Let's start mashing in. That is mash in finished. I'm now gonna go ahead and place my top screen on. You don't need to use one of these things. My system happens to have it, so I'm going to. It just allows me to recirculate my, what am I talking about now? Wort. Recirculate the wort without the grains getting sucked back through the grain pipe. Sorry guys, my place is all over the head. Now, that's all done. I want you to take notice of the color right now because that is gonna be a whole lot darker by the time we finish mashing our beer. And that is because we've just got so much crystal malt in there because the old school, and I'm saying old school, but really it's only old school by craft beer standards. It's really a new style of beer in the scheme of things. But the old school American pale ale styles had such a heavy caramel backbone holding together the whole beer because they were boozier than beers were before that in the pale ale style. They were more bitter than the beers were before that. They were packed full of New World hops with a lot more citrus, a lot more tropical fruits, a lot more grapefruit, and a lot more alpha acids. So in order to carry all of that together and have that holy trinity of balance, it's all about sweetness, ABV, and bitterness. Those three working together is what gives you a truly well-made balanced beer, and that's what made the American Pale Ale by Sierra Nevada so successful. It was able to carry so much extra hop character than any of the pale ales before it, and that's why it went bonkers and boomed the craft beer scene. This beer here, with that two-row and with that crystal malt, is following that very proud tradition of the classic American Pale Ale. I'm gonna let this mash at 65 degrees Celsius for 1 hour, followed by a mash out at 77 degrees Celsius or 150 Fahrenheit, I think it might be, with the sole purpose there of denaturing the enzymes, so we stop breaking down all of our sugars and we end up with body still at the end of this. After we have finished both of those steps, we'll come back and talk sparging. We are not yet at the end of our hour and starting the sparge, but I did just think it was worth mentioning this brew day today is actually a suggestion from our Patreons. So if you want to actually get on board with suggesting what beers we should be making on this channel, check out Patreon in the link down below. That's where most of our brew day ideas are coming from now. So if you want to help contribute to that and share some ideas that you want us to make, check out Patreon in the link down below. That is mash done. Finish the mash out, and now we are on to sparging. If you're not familiar with what sparging is, and apologies for the regular viewers and tenured brewers for going over this again, but you can imagine that you've got a sponge with a bunch of soapy water in it, you squeeze it out, soap comes out, you put it in a bucket of clean water, squeeze it again, more soap comes out. The same thing happens with your grains. You've got a whole bunch of sugar in there that is draining out with the wort, but there's still going to be sugar that's trapped in those grains, so we run hot water over the top of it. In this case, I'm going to be running another 15 liters of water over the top, which we call sparge water. It's also had its water chemistry accounted for, as well as some phosphoric acid to account for the pH. But for all the granular details of all this stuff, don't worry about keeping track throughout the video. The full recipe is in the link down below, so you can check it out and read it in your own time. After we run this 15 liters of sparge water over the top, we're gonna crank this thing up to get to boiling. We are well and truly at a boil, so let's talk about the first hop addition of many today, which is going to have to be Cascade. Cascade is just one of the godfathers of the craft beer movement. Its citrus character, its subtle, like kind of tropical character, but more bordering into those more citrus fruits, is really what helped define the new world of craft beers way back when Sierra Nevada started producing their pale ale. So today we're going to kick off with a 1 hour edition of 14 grams / half an ounce of Cascade, which is going to give us 11 IBUs. We'll come back in 50 minutes from now to add our next hop addition. We are also going to add Whirlpooling at 15 minutes left in the boil, but it's not worth filming that. Just note it down for you guys. So we'll circle back at the end of the hour to do our next round of hop additions. But it's also worth pointing out that if you want to get your brew on, check out our merch store, get some Beer Banter and Bloody Good Times merch if you want to help try and support this channel so we can keep producing great content like this for you guys. Now, we'll see you at the end of the hour. This is Odin finally picking up the camera, which is why the camera work suddenly has gotten so shoddy. It's shaky, it's wobbly, because when I'm without him, this guy does a much better job. It's stable. But Odin's back, and it's time for our 10-minute hop edition for the Sierra Nevada clone. This is going to be 28 grams / 1 ounce of Cascade once again, so really just doubling down on getting that citrus and classic clean bitterness into the beer that you expect from an old school American pale ale. So this one, I keep saying old school. It's new school, old school craft pale ale. There we go. But this is going to give us another 9 IBUs, so we're slowly climbing our way up the ranks to our target of, I think it's 36 IBUs from memory. That will come later in the video. But Cascade, again, just really great at giving clean bitterness. Pretty decent alpha acid content, and again, that classic citrus character that is just so famous in the American pale ale scene. So we're going to run that for another 10 minutes, and then we're going to start cooling this thing down for our next couple of editions. We are at flame out. So here's what we're going to do. We need to start pumping our beer through our chiller to cool this thing down. We are not going to cool it down to yeast pitching temp yet, and we're also going to do another hop addition. This time we are doing 1 ounce / 28 grams of Simcoe. This is not in the recipe for what Sierra Nevada released as how to brew their pale ale, but I'm doing this for a very good reason. I've done a lot of reading about people replicating their recipe, and they found it to be somewhat lacking in punch, not quite holding up to what the original actually is. And I think that adding a little bit of Simcoe in there is going to give us a bit more of that resin backbone and a bit more of that pine character that's kind of so famous in really robust American pale ales. Yes, the Sierra Nevada leans heavily into the citrus, but there is that resiny thing going on in the background coupling with the crystal malt. So Simcoe, I think, is going to help get us there. I'm going to bring this down to 76 degrees Celsius, where we're going to do our final hop edition of the day. We are now whirlpooling. So we've got our little Whirlpool arm attachment going on. That's going to give us a nice little jacuzzi action going on down here, which is very important because we've got quite a decent hop dump to throw in now. This time it's going to be 58 grams each, which is 2 ounces each of the Simcoe and the Cascade. And we need this whirlpool going on so that A, helps with the flavor extraction, but more importantly, it's going to generate a nice hop cone for us at the bottom of the vessel so that we don't take all of this debris with us into the fermenter. But again, doubling down on that citrus from the the Cascade, and really amping into that resin backbone character from the Simcoe. Simcoe is also famous for having citrus too, but I think the two together is going to give us a less one-dimensional version of the pale ale and give us a little bit more substance, character, and a bit more going on. That's going to whirlpool for 20 minutes, and then we'll start cooling down for yeast pitching. We haven't finished whirlpooling, but I did forget to mention the IBU count from that edition. That is going to be 13.1 IBUs, looking at a total of 37 IBUs, which, as long as all of our numbers have gone to plan, is exactly on target for what the Sierra Nevada actual version really is. Now, we'll come back when we're cooling. Now, we haven't finished the whirlpool, but I did take a little gravity reading, and we are way over target. This is sitting at 1.06. I want this to be around 1.053 for us to actually hit that target ABV. So I'm going to dilute with 3 liters of water. Just calling that out for you guys. It probably means you could sparge with an extra 3 to 5 liters. So for the Americans in the audience, probably an extra gallon of sparge water would get you actually on target. Now, we'll wait for it to cool down. We're ready to transfer. Let's open up the pump and we can get this show on the road. Full disclosure, I did make a small mistake because we got hungry, we went and had dinner, and I kept the thing whirlpooling for probably an extra half an hour thinking, well, it's already whirlpooling, it's cooled down, nothing's gonna happen. Totally forgot you do generate IBUs when you whirlpool. So, might have made this thing too bitter. Nothing to do about it now, nothing I can change. We'll just have to wait and see with the final product. But just something for me to keep in mind as I do the final tasting on this. Once we've finished our transfer, we can talk about yeast. Now this is why you whirlpool when you're doing a hop heavy beer. This is the very reason, because this is a very, very pretty hop cone sitting right there in the center of our boiler, leaving all the trub in the tank itself, or in the boiler, instead of coming over into the fermenter tank. That's why you do it. Now, let's talk yeast. It's an obvious one. We have to use US-05. It is the absolute bread and butter staple for not just like American pale ales, but just craft pale ales broadly speaking around this era of time when we were starting to get this bit of craft revolution going. So US-05 is going to be our go-to here. It's going to leave us pretty clean fermentation profile. There'll be a touch of fruity ester in there, but really this yeast takes a backseat to allow the hops and the malt character to be the star of the show, which is exactly what we want in this particular clone recipe. Now, whoops, I'm spilling yeast everywhere. Now that that's done, it's also time to eat our pill. This here is a wrapped pill. I've spoken about it in a few videos, but if you haven't seen it, what it basically is a digital hydrometer. So I drop this into the tank and it gives me real-time data to my phone about where our fermentation progress is at. If you want to see a full video explaining what that is and how it works, link to that video right there. Now that all this is done, we're going to close up the fermenter and get our fermentation started. I'm going to aim for a temperature around 20 to 22 degrees Celsius. If it gets too warm, I'll crank up the pressure fermentation to try and prevent overly estery profiles from coming through. But I suspect after about a week of primary, we'll be looking good to start our first dry hop edition. So, we'll see you then. We're not dry hopping, we're still here, but Odin just said behind the camera, I didn't realize they dry hop. They don't. Sierra Nevada doesn't do a dry hop in their pale ale. However, what a lot of home brewers have noticed when they've tried to copy the Sierra Nevada clone recipe is that it doesn't quite have enough of a hoppy punch in comparison to the things that you actually get out of their cans. So our way to compensate for that is to give a bit more of that fresh hop character through a small dry hop addition. That's the idea here. It's not a like for like exact on what Sierra Nevada says they do, but I think it will get us a step closer in the right direction of reproducing their results. Now, we'll see you in a week. It's now day 7 of fermentation and we are sitting around about 1.01-ish. So I'd say that's fairly close to final gravity, graph up here for what the wrapped pill is telling me right now. And that means it's time to add our final hop addition. I'm again running with our combination of Simcoe and Cascade, this time with 14 grams / half an ounce of Simcoe and 102 grams / 3.5 ounces of Cascade. Sierra Nevada does not dry hop, as I mentioned. What they say they don't dry hop anyway, but again, from the research that I found online, a lot of homebrewers have found that the exact homebrew recipe that they released doesn't quite give enough of the hoppy punch that's so characteristic of the big balls to the wall American pale ale. So a little dry hop addition here is going to help get us a bit closer to that. Let's throw it in the tank. It's probably also worth noting that I have been fermenting under pressure. I have been doing this for 2 reasons. One, it got a little bit hot in my little brewery here, so I needed to do a bit of pressure fermentation to help keep the off flavors of this beer down. And 2, when I know I'm going to dry hop, I like fermenting under pressure because I feel like it makes this little bit of CO2 blanket for me to help protect the beer a bit better when I go ahead and throw my hops in like so. I don't know if that actually works, but it makes me feel a little bit better. I'm now going to flush this with a bit of CO2 as well, burp the tank a little bit to make sure we don't have any oxygen ruining our hop-heavy pale ale. Now, we just have to sit back and wait. I am going to let this dry hop kick in for 2 to 3 days. I'll bump the temperature up slightly and do a bit of a diacetyl rest just to make sure we don't have any of those weird buttery popcorn flavors coming through. After that, I'm going to cold crash and then you'll see me with a fresh pint. And here is the final result. First thing I need to call out is I know that my one over on the left is hazy. It's only been kegged 2 days ago, so it is still very fresh, very green, and really hasn't had the time to settle out and gain that clarity that a classic Sierra Nevada has. However, ignoring the cloudiness, the color is, I think, very, very bang on. Won't be able to tell for certain until it's cleared out, but I will do an update on Patreon eventually once we have a fully clear Sierra Nevada clone, and then we'll compare side by side if we actually got that color right. But it's all about the taste. Let's go in, shall we? So starting with Sierra Nevada. classic, it's that classic flavor that you just know and love from Sierra Nevada. It's that hefty bitterness that carries through the palate. And they're not shy about the bitterness in an American pale ale, but after that, it's got that malt sweetness, particularly that caramel body coming through in the belly, and then it finishes up with that crisp, dry mouthfeel and just a lot of citrus. I think like that it's just predominantly that Cascade coming through, providing that citrus and slightly fruity hit. It's just, it tastes like freedom to the Americans out there. But let's move on to my version. Now, I also do need to call out, this can that I've got here, did get the can, is sitting at 5%, and I would have to suspect the IBUs maybe are slightly lower, and I think the original Sierra Nevada was 5.6. That's what my research told me, so unless I am strongly mistaken, and I'd love to be corrected by you guys if you know better than me, drop a comment down below. Has Sierra Nevada changed their recipe recently? I'm not sure, but I remember it being a 5.6% beer. Anyway, let's go in for my version. Okay, nice. It's got that, wow, that's really similar. Okay, it's got that dry body, crisp finishing. It's got that crystal coming through in spades. There's lots of caramel body coming through in the back there. I'm doing a quick check on my IBUs. I came out at 39 IBUs and 5.6% ABV, so I nailed the target ABV that I was aiming for, that I thought Sierra Nevada was. I am slightly over on my IBUs. Sierra Nevada's IBUs, I think 37 in the original recipe. I've hit 39, so I'm slightly high. But it is very, very similar. That ester profile is also clean on both, slightly fruity, but predominantly clean on both, and taking a back seat to let the hops and the malt body shine through. But I'm calling both of those very similar, except my beer is coming out with a more pronounced hoppy profile in terms of that, it's got slightly more resin and slightly more just generic fruitiness. However, I don't think that's because the recipe is wrong. I suspect it's just because mine is so much fresher. Mine's, 2 days old on tap. This can, does it have a package date? 2nd of the 7th, 25. 2nd of the 4th, 25. And I don't know if that's American format or Australian format. I'm guessing it's American format. So potentially this was canned back in April. I'll do some homework and figure that out later if I can find a more accurate date. So if that actually is something like, 6-7 months old, it explains a lot. Like the hoppiness for sure would have faded by that stage. I can't believe that can would be that old though. I'll put a comment down below or something, or Odin will put something up on the screen if I can figure out what the actual date that this thing was canned on. But I have to say that despite the fact that Sierra Nevada publishes their recipe as not being dry hopped, I recommend as a home brewer, you do the dry hop. I think you need that to carry through that punch of that classic American, hoppy pale ale profile, because big commercial breweries have the pick of the litter when it comes to the quality of ingredients. So whilst we might both be using Cascade, the difference is their crop of Cascade is the freshest, the best, the creme de la creme. So even without dry hopping, their Cascade hop addition would carry through with a lot more punch than what you could get access to as a home brewer. Your quality of hops is just not the same as what the big craft commercial breweries get to use. So I think to compensate for that, that little dry hop addition does help to kind of just beef things up and get it as close as possible to the real thing. I call this an absolute success. I think this clone is 95% of the way there, if not more. I will be doing a blind taste test over on Patreon with cameraman Odin so that he can give us his unbiased opinion on which is which. And I guess now is as good a time as any to say thank you to our Patreons. This particular video was also a Patreon vote. So if you want to have your say in what beers we should be cloning or just what videos we should be doing, check out Patreon in the link down below. That's where we're all discussing what beers we should make next on the channel. We chat about what beers just each of us are drinking, what we've been brewing. And for our next, whoops, I've spilled on myself. For our next couple of brew days, they are also all Patreon votes. One of the recipes is heavily inspired from one of our Patreons. Thank you, John, for your inspiration. We are gonna be taking your recipe and putting a little bit of a wombat spin on it, but predominantly keeping it very similar to the way that you brewed it. So we're gonna brew one of the subscribers' videos, one of the subscribers' beers in the next video. Anyway, guys, thank you ever so much for watching. Your hint for what the next brew day will be as we get closer towards Christmas time. Which beer is going to come out first, I'm not sure. There's going to be a couple of them. There's going to be Christmas themes going on in some of the next few beers coming up. So, I don't know, drop comments down below on what Christmas themed beers you think we should be brewing, because I'm always happy to take some more suggestions on what we should make next. Cheers, catch you later.